Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take a close look at a whole stack of articles, reports, different notes, and really pull out what you need to know. We try to cut through the noise, find those surprising details, and give you the context to feel properly informed. Today, we're doing a deep dive into something incredibly recent and deeply tragic, the crash of Air India Flight AI 171.
Mm.
It's really sent shockwaves, hasn't it?
It absolutely has. A major incident like this always does.
Yeah. So we've gathered notes, reports from various sources covering what happened. Our goal here is to work through this material together, focusing only on what these sources are telling us about the critical details of the crash itself, its immediate devastating impact, and the first steps of the investigation that's now underway.
And sticking strictly to the information provided in those sources is key here.
Exactly. What really jumps out from the sources right from the beginning is the timeline. I mean, this wasn't some complicated emergency playing out over minutes. This was a Dreamliner, a modern jet crashing just seconds after taking off. It's surprising how fast it was and just utterly heartbreaking in the end. Okay, let's try and unpack this.
Yeah, the sources immediately highlight just how compressed that critical phase was. It wasn't,
Yeah.
a long flight that ran into trouble miles out. This was all confined to those very first moments after leaving the runway.
Right. So the details from the sources. Flight AI 171 left Ahmedabad's Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel International Airport. The time was exactly 13.38 India Standard Time, and it was headed for London Gatwick. The plane itself, a Boeing 787-8 Dreamliner, registration VTANB, about 11 years old apparently.
Relatively young aircraft in airline terms.
Yeah, on board. 230 passengers, 12 crew members, so 242 people total. And the sources make a point of noting the mix of nationalities, people from India, the UK, Portugal, Canada.
That detail really underscores the global nature of air travel, doesn't it? How a single tragedy like this can ripple outwards and affect so many different places almost instantly.
Absolutely. And those crucial, really terrifying moments happened almost immediately. According to CCTV footage mentioned in the source material, it was about, 17 seconds after takeoff. The plane was seen on camera, altitude around 650 feet.
Very low, still in the initial climb phase.
And at that point, the footage apparently shows it suddenly descending, tail down. Crucially, the landing gear was still extended at this point. The sources describe it just plummeting incredibly fast. It exploded into a fireball roughly 33 seconds after leaving the ground.
33 seconds. Just
Wow.
process that.
It's barely any time at all, just over half a minute from being airborne to impact.
That time frame, it's exceptionally short. As the sources describe it, the rapid descent, the low altitude, it tells you immediately and tells investigators the crew had virtually no time. No time to figure out what was wrong, no time to troubleshoot, definitely no time to attempt any kind of recovery.
Did they even get a distress call out?
The sources mention a Mayday call. It came at 1:39 p.m., so just a minute after departure. But communication stopped right after that, immediately. And think about the flight environment they were in, low altitude, relatively low speed right after takeoff. There's just zero margin for error or reaction time in that situation.
And the location of the impact. This is where the sources describe something really awful because the devastation wasn't just on the plane. The material specifies the aircraft hit the hostel block of the BJ Medical College, right there in the Magani Nagar district of Ahmedabad. And the timing, just terrible. It happened during lunchtime.
Yeah, the timing, the sources point out, makes it particularly grim. Hitting a populated building during a busy period like that, it dramatically increased the casualties on the ground. It adds this whole other awful layer to the tragedy.
It really did. The sources report on board, it was almost a total loss, 241 fatalities out of 242 people. But then on the ground, the sources confirm at least 38 deaths, medical students, residents in the hostel, and over 60 people injured there too.
Sure.
And the initial response described in the reports, it wasn't even the official emergency crews first. It was local trainees and doctors from the college itself. They rushed into the wreckage.
That detail, about the college staff trying to help immediately, it speaks volumes about the chaos right after impact and the incredible bravery shown by those people. The scale of this tragedy is really twofold, isn't it? The near-complete loss on the aircraft, plus this devastating random impact on a civilian area.
But amidst all that devastation, the sources do highlight one detail that seems, almost unbelievable. There was a sole survivor from the plane.
Which, finding a single survivor in a crash like this, high speed, high impact, clearly massive structural damage, it's extraordinarily rare. Really against the odds in accident investigation history.
His name is Vishwash Kumar Ramesh. He's 40 years old, British Indian. The reports say he was in seat 11A, right next to an emergency exit. And somehow, according to the sources, he survived with only minor injuries.
Minor injuries after that. Incredible.
Yeah. His reported quote is just startlingly simple, given everything. He apparently said, "I just walked out in it. It's a miracle." But the sources also carry that incredibly sad detail: his brother was seated nearby, and he didn't make it.
That story, it
Yeah.
immediately raises questions for the investigators, doesn't it? While the sources note his location near an exit, understanding precisely how he survived when nobody else did, I mean, it could potentially offer some unexpected insights. It's often a mix of really improbable factors, but the investigation will absolutely look closely. His seat's position relative to the impact points, the way the fuselage broke apart, maybe it reveals something about the plane's structural behavior in those final moments.
So, with the immediate rescue and recovery efforts ongoing, the focus shifts to the investigation, the crucial, painstaking part. The sources mention the recovery of the black boxes. That's the flight data recorder, the FDR, and the cockpit voice recorder, the CVR.
Essential pieces of the puzzle.
Right, although the sources note the CVR, the one that records the cockpit sounds, was found a few days later. Apparently, that's not unusual when the wreckage is so fragmented.
No, it can take time to locate everything. But why are these boxes so critical? This is really where investigators start to piece together the reality of those final seconds based on what the sources describe. The FDR, it records thousands of things about the plane's state: airspeed, altitude, engine power settings, control movements, even the position of the flaps and landing gear. Everything. And the CVR captures the sounds in the cockpit. Pilot voices, alarms, clicks of switches. It gives insight into what the crew was doing, what they were aware of. Together, they're like the most objective witnesses.
And the investigation itself, the sources say India's Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau, the AAIB, is leading it.
Correct. That's India's main air accident investigation body.
And, as standard practice for a crash involving a U.S.-made plane like the Boeing 787, they're getting help, right? The sources mention experts from the U.S. National Transportation Safety Board, the NTSB, also UK investigators because of the destination and passengers, and Boeing itself.
That international cooperation is vital, and it's actually mandated by international aviation agreements. The NTSB has huge experience with Boeing investigations. The UK has a clear interest because of their citizens lost. And Boeing's technical knowledge of the 787 systems is obviously indispensable when analyzing the data.
Okay, so what are they looking at initially? The sources list some potential causes under review right now.
What did they mention?
Possibility of a catastrophic dual-engine failure, that's one. Also, potential malfunction specifically with the GUS engines, the sources name those. And then something about an unusual landing gear and flap configuration at takeoff, like the gear was still down when it should have been coming up and maybe the flaps weren't set right or were pulled up too soon.
Okay, those potential causes listed in the sources make sense as initial areas of focus for a crash happening so soon after takeoff. Engine failure means loss of power, a configuration issue that affects how the plane flies, especially critical right after liftoff when you're slow and need maximum lift. Given that rapid descent the sources describe, the black box data will be absolutely key to narrowing this down quickly. Was there a sudden, simultaneous power loss recorded on the FDR? Did the data show the pilots fighting the controls because of an aerodynamic problem, maybe from the wrong flap setting? The sources point investigators right to these critical questions.
And beyond the technical side of the investigation, this event, as the sources really highlight, it has much bigger implications for aviation generally. One really grim milestone noted is that this is the first fatal hull loss crash, meaning the plane was destroyed for a Boeing 787 Dreamliner in passenger service.
That is a significant point from the sources, yeah. The Dreamliner's been flying for, what, over a decade now? Millions of flight hours logged. It's had its share of technical glitches over the years, sure, but it hadn't had a catastrophic, fatal accident that destroyed the airframe until this one. So inevitably, this incident is going to bring intense scrutiny onto the 787 type worldwide, even though we don't know the cause yet.
And the sources also mention this crash certainly ramps up the pressure and the existing safety questions around Boeing, doesn't it? Especially after everything with the 737 MAX.
Exactly. Boeing's been under a microscope, regarding design, manufacturing, certification processes. Now, the 787 is a different aircraft, and again, the cause here is unknown. But any major incident involving one of their planes right now is bound to amplify concerns from regulators, airlines, the public, everyone.
And India's Aviation Authority, the DGCA, they took action immediately based on the reports. The sources say they ordered urgent safety checks on all Boeing 787-8s and 787-DAs operating in India.
That's a standard and frankly a prudent move. Regulators often do that after a major accident with a specific plane type. It lets them check for any potential common issues or maintenance worries across the rest of the fleet. It's a precaution while the main investigation gets underway.
Shifting focus slightly again, the sources also cover the human side, the governmental response after something like this. They mention official condolences from India's Ministry of External Affairs. And the Tata Group, who now own Air India, they've reportedly reaffirmed commitments to support families, provide compensation.
Well, the logistical and emotional challenges after a big accident like this are just immense. It's not just the rescue and investigation. It's the long-term support for victims' families, often spread across multiple countries. It's hugely complex.
Sounds it. The sources detail some really difficult challenges in the recovery efforts, dealing with, badly damaged remains, relying on DNA identification, and the slow, painful process of getting victims' remains back to their home countries. This has apparently fueled grief and, according to some reports in the sources, led to criticism from bereaved families, particularly in the UK, where many victims were from, about parts of the official response.
That reported criticism, it highlights just how complex that international coordination is. Recovering and identifying victims, especially after such a high-impact crash, it's technically demanding, emotionally draining, and it cuts across borders, agencies, cultural sensitivities. It's incredibly tough.
So based on everything in the source material we've looked at, what happens next? The investigation's clearly still in its early days, but the sources seem to outline the main areas of work and, potential outcomes.
Yeah, the absolute priority, as the sources imply, is that deep dive into the FDR and CVR data. The flight data recorder will give that precise second-by-second picture: aircraft performance, control movements, engine parameters. And the cockpit voice recorder will reveal crew awareness, their communication, any sounds that might indicate mechanical problems or alarms going off. Those recordings will likely show the clearest path to understanding the sequence of events.
And besides the black boxes, the sources indicate there'll be extensive technical assessments, looking closely at the engines, the flight controls, how the plane was set up for takeoff.
Absolutely. Scrutinizing the engine performance data, physically examining recovered parts of the flight control systems, meticulously reviewing the takeoff configuration against standard procedures, and depending on what they find as the sources point towards those potential failure areas, there will almost certainly be regulatory actions down the line.
What kind of actions?
Well, potential outcomes mentioned or hinted at in the sources could include things like new airworthiness directives for the entire Boeing 787 fleet, if a design or manufacturing flaw is identified. Maybe specific reviews or maintenance procedures for the GE/GX engines, if they turn out to be implicated. And possibly, depending on what the CVR shows about crew actions, requirements for changes to Air India's operating procedures or pilot training protocols.
Wow, okay. This tragedy, looking at all the source material, it really is a stark, devastating reminder, isn't it? Even with the most advanced planes, these complex systems depend on every single part, every human action, working correctly, especially in those critical moments like takeoff.
It truly is. And as the AIB and their international partners continue that meticulous work, piecing together what happened from the wreckage, from the data, this incident just underscores how critical independent accident investigation really is. It's not about finding someone to blame. It's about understanding every factor, technical, human, environmental, that played a part. Because complex accidents, they often have multiple causes that all converge at the wrong moment. Waiting for that full, detailed report is so crucial. That's how we ensure the lessons learned from this awful event genuinely enhance air safety for everyone in the future. It really leaves you thinking, doesn't it, about the incredible precision needed in every single detail when you're launching thousands of pounds of metal and people into the sky.
It certainly does. We'll definitely keep an eye on developments from the AAIB inquiry based on what gets reported in reliable sources and share updates when more information comes out. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us today.